You're listening to the Agent and the Fan podcast with sports agent Chris Leible and fan Lou Columna.
Hey, everybody. This is the Agent and the Fan podcast. I'm Chris Leible. I'm the agent. I'm here with my man, Lou Columna. He's the fan. What's up, Lou?
Not much. What's going on, bud?
Hey, it's exciting. We're into the season. Things are moving along. There's a lot of interesting storylines in baseball, and I'm excited to talk a little bit about those. But today we have a very, very special friend, a very special guest, I should say, and he's an old friend of mine and a dear friend of mine. It's Mets former closer and Hall of Famer John Franco is going to join us today, and that's really exciting for me to have him come on. Johnny's just a great guy. He's an institution in New York City. And really an all-time great. And I want to get into all that with him. And I want to talk about my relationship with him. And I know you have a lot of things you want to talk to Johnny about. But sure. Johnny is he's the best of the best. And it's going to be very fun to have him on here talking. He's probably going to be busting my chops, which he normally does. And, that goes with the territory. So, but I'm looking forward to having him join us.
No, that's awesome. Yeah. So almost first month of the season, it's been pretty good, man. We a lot of good surprises, both good, good and bad surprises. I have a few of mine. What are yours?
Well, I mean, I think it's very early in the season, so I don't put too much stock into too many things. I know when the Mets started off 0-5, everybody was, jumping off ship, and it was like the Titanic had sunk. And I was like, guys, it's 5. And now they're playing really well. And really they've played, I think they have played all pretty strong teams. They've had good competition, teams with all winning records and stuff. So I don't put too much credence into it. Baseball is the one sport. If you start 0-5 in the NFL, you can, it's pretty tough to come back from. But when you play 162 games, 0-5 isn't the end of the world. So I think everybody should realize that, and that could be put into any context. If a player is off to a hot start, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be the MVP. And if a player is off to a slow start, it doesn't mean that they should be released or sent to the minors. So
I agree, but with that said, my surprise is the Astros. I mean, you can come back from 0-5, but you're 6-14. That's tough.
Yeah, I'm not going to worry too much about the Astros. I think the Astros will be fine. I think they have some flaws, and obviously there's a transition going on there. But I think the Astros are still a strong team, and I expect they'll bounce back and do well. I think there's some tough competition there.
Well, that's my point. So here's the question: at 6-14. You got to go on a great run, because you can't be 5 games over 500. I mean, you have to, at this point, you got to play 700 ball.
Well, I wouldn't worry too much about it if I was the Astros. I mean, you might have some concern, but I think you don't, if they go on a little winning streak, they'll be okay. And it doesn't all have to be done in one shot. You don't have to run off a 10-game winning streak to, one of my former players that I worked with the Mets had a great quote. Lance Johnson, the one dog, he said, you can't eat the elephant. You can't eat the elephant all in one bite. You got to take it one bite at a time. And I think that's the way to go.
You can't win the division in April, but you can sure lose it.
Well, look, I think it's the way baseball is now. There's not one division winner. There's not one pennant winner. Yeah, you just got to get in there. I think the Astros will be there in the end, but we'll see. I mean, again, maybe they're just having a rough year and it isn't their year, but I wouldn't write them off is my point.
Agreed. So a surprise for me, I mean, it's really no surprise in terms of a player, and that's Mike Trout. I mean, he's had so many injuries the last couple of years. To see him kind of come out of here and and just kind of kill it and be Mike Trout, like the guy that we're used to, is pretty awesome. Considering you don't have an Ohtani, behind you, you don't really have let's face it, it's not a great team. I mean, they're playing decent now, but it's really good to see Mike Trout being Mike Trout, and it's always good for baseball.
No, Mike Trout's Mike Trout. Okay, so he's gonna do Mike Trout things, and now that he seems healthy, he's in a great spot, and I think he's gonna step his game up, and that's what he's doing so far, and I expect him to have a tremendous year.
No, me too. I'm happy for him. I mean, I'm not an Angels fan, but really, I'm a baseball fan, right? And if you could have Mike Trout being who he is, that's great. On the opposite side, what player has disappointed you?
Well, again, Lou, I don't try to get too much wrapped up into a few weeks into the season.
I understand. I mean, I know it's April, but sometimes, listen, like sometimes you get a vibe of a player like this is not his year.
Well, obviously you have somebody in mind. So who do you got?
No, I don't have. I'm not trying to say any Mets or anything like that, because listen, to your point, they were killing Pete Alonso the first 6 games of the season. And
he was just player of the week, and he's been
that's my point. But like, there's I mean, there is something to starting off really well, where you can then to give an example, Volpe was red hot. Now he's cooled off a little bit. But he wasn't going to bat 450. We know that, right? So we know that was coming. So you get that buffer. But if you're batting, like I've seen some averages, and you've seen them too, like 078, 110. That's a hard climb up.
Look, it's baseball is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's a long season. For a reason, and the strong survive. And if you could stick it out, there's going to be a lot of peaks and valleys. So my point as an agent, I would say you can't get too high, you can't get too low. Like you said, nobody's going to hit 450 who gets off to a great first week. And, most likely you're not, Francisco Lindor got off to a slow start or whatever. He really slumped at the beginning as an example, but I mean, again, I don't know what kind of a year he's going to have. And, there's some inconsistency sometimes, especially nowadays with statistics, but you got guys hitting 188 who are, being renowned as great players. So the game has changed quite a bit, and it's a different type of expectations, and different statistics are being looked at and things like that. So again, I don't read too much into anything when it comes to the early season expectations and hot starts and slow starts. I don't.
So what is your cutoff point where you're saying, okay, hey, these guys are for real, both good or bad, both for teams or for players? Like, what's that midway?
Well, again, this is the one sport. It's every day. It's 162 games, 182 days. I mean, it's. I mean,
like by June 1st. You kind of know.
The thing is, in today's society, everybody wants instant gratification. Everything wants everything to happen right away. Baseball doesn't really work like that, even though things have changed in the game. It just doesn't work like that. You could have a terrible first half and have a great second half and end up having a solid season. So I don't, again, at some point, if somebody's in August is hitting, 152 and has 2 homers and 13 RBIs, then I might say, hey, listen, but again, there's different
speaking like an agent. I love it.
Yeah. I wonder, and then sometimes you have to start wondering what's going on. Is there an injury there that they're not telling about, whatever it is, all those things. And sometimes agents know about things that other people don't know, or they're dealing with family things. That's another thing people don't realize. These guys are, as Mike Trout's a superstar player, but he's also a human being, and he has things going on in his life. There's so many things, outside factors. There could be, a sick family member. It could be a, husband and wife issue. There could be, so many different things that could possibly go wrong off the field that could spill onto the, the on-field demeanor and play and all those things. So, that's life, and that's baseball is always, we always say, is a metaphor for life. So
true. He's a kid, but one kid that is coming to my mind, and just kind of, you've had these young, really good, Reyes being one, Jackson Holiday, with the Orioles. What are you as an agent? Listen, he was going to get called up. We know that, right? he has a father who played baseball, so that's a little different than you getting a guy from DR or from Venezuela who's kind of wide-eyed and doesn't know much. But what do you, in general, what do you tell your client coming up, as a phenom at 20 years old?
No, I think the one thing you don't want to do is take them out of where they are. They got there for a reason. So you want to make sure, they're out there, they're having fun. Just keep doing what you're doing would be my advice always to my clients, because they don't call you up at 20 years old unless they think you can handle yourself and you're going to be an asset and help the team and be a good player. So you don't want to, get them thinking about things that aren't necessary to be thought of, and just go do what you do what's gotten you to this point in your life and your career. And that's what I would always say.
How long did it take Jose to acclimate himself to the clubhouse at that young of an age and being, so highly regarded when you come into a locker room full of veterans?
No, I think he had a good spot, and I think you see that. I mean, Jeter obviously was a great guy at the right time with the right team when he came up, and Jose, I think also he had a good group of veterans, and Johnny could probably talk about that more because Johnny was on the team and for his first bunch of years. But I think Jose, he just kind of went about his business. He's on the field was a flashy player, but off the field he's very quiet and he's very friendly. He's nice. He's always willing to listen. He's not a know-it-all. And I think those are the types of players that, and Johnny can talk about this because Johnny's like an old school player where there are certain rules of the game, unwritten rules of the game. And Johnny's a big, believer in those things. He was the captain of the Mets when I was working there. And, I think those guys, and again, we could talk about this more with him if we can get onto the subject. I know we have a lot to talk about with him, but for example, at the time back in the late '90s, Octavio Dotel was a prospect who came up with them, and I remember all the veterans saying they really liked him because he listened and he would sit and he would talk to you and he wanted to know and he wanted to learn from you, and that guys really respect that. So I think, that's important. And, I said, Jackson's been around on Major League Locker Room. I think I saw something where since he's 3 years old. So he's a great fit. And let's face it, the three Jacksons, we got the three Jacksons now, right? Because you got Jackson Holiday, Churio, and
Merrill.
And Merrill now out in San Diego. So you got the three Jacksons. They're all 20 years old and they're all studs and they're all just like young guys who are having fun, who are just great at baseball, and it's fun. I've had a chance to watch all three of them early here in their careers, and boy, you just tell that they have that quality, and that's why they're where they are. There's plenty of guys with talent in the minor leagues.
No, listen, these guys. I mean, Churio for me is he's just a flat out stud. To be, again. More than I, but I think, going into a major league locker room as a young guy and commanding, the team, this is Churio's team. Yes, Yelich is there. I get it. But, they traded a lot of these guys. This is going to be his team,
No, eventually. But again, you want to have that respect and you want to have that, yield to the older guys for certain things. And then on the field, you let your play do the talking. But I think what people don't pay attention to or understand or realize is that there's so much downtime when you're not on the field. You got 3 hours in the game, but other than that, you're in the locker room, you're on buses, you're on planes, you're spending so much time with each other. And that's where you really make your bones in the game. And that's where people respect you. Anybody with eyes can see that Churio's a stud or Merrill's a stud or Holiday's a stud baseball player, but how they handle themselves off the field is extremely important. And again, we've talked about this on the podcast before, but baseball has so many, everything's based on your time in the game. And, there's an automatic respect for somebody who has a certain amount of time in the game. So someone like John Franco, who played so many years, 20 plus years in the big leagues, that's a different level of person than somebody who's been up and down for 2 years or whatever it is. And that's always how the game has been. And that's one thing, as much as we say the game has changed, I don't think that's changed a whole lot. So And John is messaging me. I guess he's having a little trouble getting on, but he's going to try and use his phone, I guess, to get on. So whatever works, we will get him on here shortly. But
by the way, it's not Christmas. I just have a Christmas stuff.
We couldn't see that, but now you've brought attention to it.
Hey, so we letting John in?
Is he there?
He is. Let's
bring him in. Johnny,
what's going on? Hi guys, how you doing?
What's going on with you? How you doing? What's new?
Nothing new to report. The same old stuff. Just enjoying life, enjoying retirement.
Well, I'm glad you could join us. We talked a little bit about you before you came on, and we want to talk about a lot of things. But obviously, Johnny, you and I go way back. I know we obviously. I want to get into our relationship together, but really just going way back for you. Obviously, you're a guy from Brooklyn, and that's a connection that we had. Obviously, not that I'm from Brooklyn, but my dad's from Brooklyn, as you know. And you came up. You weren't probably the prototypical baseball player, or at least pitcher, as a kid, but
what do you
mean what's that?
What do you mean baseball player? Prototypical?
No, I'm saying when you see a left-handed pitcher on the mound, they're usually like 6'5", and
yeah, I got you.
Johnny, I can't hear you too well.
How about now? Is that better?
Yeah, much better.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Talk about. I don't know if we ever even talked about this with you. You grew up loving the game, growing up in Brooklyn.
Exactly. I grew up. I have a brother who's 5 years older than I. My dad was involved in the PAL, Police Athletic League. So I used to be on my brother's coattail all the time when he, because he played Little League. So I was a little bit too young. But once I got to be the right age at 8 years old, I played they had this farm team. And then I was good enough to be put on a team playing against 10-year-olds. So then it all just, escalated to where, I always played above my head. So if I was 8, I was playing against 10. If I was 12, I was playing against 12-year-olds. 10, I was playing against 12-year-olds. And then all the way on through high school, and then on to St. John's, and then eventually getting drafted by the Dodgers. But along the way, my senior year in high school, I won All City. I hit 695. All the supers. The star of the team. But I didn't get drafted because, like you said earlier, Chris, I wasn't that typical pitcher. They said I was too small, and I remember the New York Mets scout, one of the Mets scouts, area scouts, said I was too small, and I didn't get drafted. But I think that was probably the best thing that happened to me was not get drafted and go to St. John's, to where I learned how to pitch. High school, if you have a good arm and you could throw hard, you usually strike 10, 12 guys out a game. And that's what I did. When I went to St. John's, I learned how to pitch. We had a great pitching coach named Howard Gershberg, who taught me how to pitch, and along with Frank Viola. And we both had pretty good, successful careers at St. John's, and then went on to the big leagues and did well in the big leagues.
So, Johnny, you went to famous Lafayette High School in Brooklyn, yes. and you had, but you weren't just a pitcher there. You just said you hit 636.
I played center field when I didn't pitch. So and then I DH'd a little bit.
No, were you recruited by anybody else besides St. John's? I'm assuming.
Well, I wanted to go to Arizona State, and I got a letter from Arizona State saying I could come there and try out, but they couldn't guarantee anything. But mostly all the local schools, Rutgers, Seton Hall, CW Post. In fact, I was supposed to go to CW Post because my high school coach played for the CW Post coach, who was the coach at the time at LIU when my high school coach was in college. I went to dinner with him the night before. I pitched in a big playoff game in here in New York City. My high school coach and myself and another player from my high school. And then I went out the following day and pitched 8 innings of a 1-hit ball, 2-hit ball against the John Jay High School, which had a pitcher named Luis Figueroa, who got drafted. Very, very good pitcher here in Brooklyn. And right after the game, the St. John's coach came into the locker room, introduced himself to my head coach. They called me in, and he offered me a full scholarship right there, right after the game. But I wouldn't have been St. John's wouldn't have known about me because prior to that I played the little travel ball with two guys who were on the St. John's baseball team. A guy named Sebi Borriello and Paul Marufi, and they had mentioned to Coach Russo at the time that they should go and check me out, and he did. And it just so happens I pitched a good game that day, and he offered me a full scholarship. So I kind of turned the page on CW Post, which was a D2 school, and I went to St. John's, which like I said, is the best thing that happened to me. I learned how to pitch. We were kind of the powerhouse of the East. We won back then we were independent, so you had to win at least 20 games to get into the ECAC, and that's what we did. In my freshman year, we went to the ECAC in the Northeast Regionals, and they put us against Nebraska, Navy, and UConn were there, and they put Nebraska into our bracket because they wanted Nebraska to be the host team, and they figured that was the easiest way to get them to Omaha, going through us. And I remember the coach came back and told us that during the coaches meeting, when they did the seeding, that Nebraska and St. John's would play the first game, and the Nebraska coach got up and said, "St. John's, who's St. John's?" So our coach came back and told us that, and we were a bunch of cocky guys from Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island, and Long Island. And we heard that, and I was selected to pitch that game against Nebraska. And I never forget, while I was warming up and on the mound, they were just ragging me, saying, "Who's the midget on the mound? Who's the small guy? Who's this? Who's that?" And I proceeded to pitch a 6-0 shutout against them. So as I was walking off the field, I kept shrinking myself. And the funny thing about that regional is that we beat Nebraska, and then Connecticut beat Nebraska. So they were the first team out. So they didn't even make it to the Omaha that year.
Oh my God! So John, quick question: at what point in St. John's did you say to yourself, like, "Hey, like, I think I can make it. Like, I know I'm good, and I think I have an opportunity to make it to the major leagues"?
Well, I always thought that in high school. You always want to get drafted out of high school. So I was very confident. But when I didn't get drafted out of high school, and then when I went to St. John's and I pitched in the first inter-squad game, and I gave up 3 triples to the third-string catcher. And I knew I said, wait a minute now, this is, if this is the third-string catcher that I'm giving up triples to, the quality of baseball on D1 is going to be pretty good. So I had to learn how to pitch, and that's where Howie Gersberg came in and taught me, you're not going to get by just with your fastball. So you got to learn how to spot your ball. You got to learn how to change speeds. You got to learn how to throw a slider, change up. And that's what we developed there. And then after that, my freshman year, because of my freshman year, and still hold that record, I was the only freshman to pitch 2 no-hitters in St. John's history. So it still hasn't done that. And I remember we played a doubleheader against Siena University. I pitched the first game, and I threw a no-hitter. Frank Viola pitched the second game, pitched a 1-hitter. So they had a tough day with their bats up there.
Oh my God, that's a batting average killer for them.
Yeah. So it was pretty good. But I think as I developed into a better pitcher at St. John's, and then I went to the Cape Cod League. I played a little summer ball in the Cape Cod League for Katuitt, and then came back. And then the thing that maybe a little disappointed was I hurt my elbow my sophomore year, and we went to the College World Series that year. So I think if I was healthy, we probably would have had a good chance of winning, because the first game, Frankie Viola pitched against Arizona, and he beat them. And Terry Francona was on that team, and a guy named Wes Clemens. They had a really good team. And then I would have had the second game, but we wound up losing to Hawaii and Cal Berkeley. And then Arizona came around and wound up winning the whole thing. So I think we would have had a chance to win it. So, but that's my only regret about college. I mean, I had a great time. I learned a lot. To this day, my college teammates and I, we get together twice a year to either go to a basketball game. Next month, they're having a reunion at St. John's for the baseball, and we all keep in touch. And it's just a camaraderie, a friendship that you'll never lose your whole life. And it's the same thing like with baseball. I played 20 years, made so many good friends, and it's just something that you'll have for the rest of your life. They'll be your friends for life.
And Johnny, I mean, that's amazing, and it's such a cool story. But you went from being undrafted in high school when you thought you had a chance, and then now all of a sudden you had this great career in college. You made a name for yourself, and you ended up getting drafted in the fifth round, right? I mean, you were a high draft pick by the Dodgers.
Fifth round by the Dodgers, yes.
And obviously the Dodgers are interesting because obviously they're in LA, but they were originally from Brooklyn.
And the thing about the Dodgers was that the two scouts, Steve Lembo and Dick Teeds, they were the scouts, and Gil Persetti, 3 scouts. Dick Teeds was the area scout. The thing about the Dodgers was they used to hold tryouts every June, like a camp, and they used to invite me at Poly Prep High School. And I used to go there and pitch. They used to have the best kids in Brooklyn come in. You know how that was. It's almost like a scout thing. And the Orioles used to do it. And I forgot there was another team that did it. So the Dodgers always invited me every year in and year out. And then my junior year, obviously that's when you're eligible to get drafted. Scouts started coming around. I had a good year my junior year. Frankie Viola again. I think Frank got drafted the second round by the Twins. And I got the 5th round by the Dodgers. So, but the Dodgers were always that team that gave me the opportunity, and there's always be a special place in my heart for the Dodgers because they believed in me and gave me an opportunity to go to pro ball.
So you go to pro ball with the Dodgers, you get traded to the Reds, and at that point in your career, did you have any idea that this was all of a sudden you were gonna take off from there?
Well, with the Dodgers, I got drafted June of '81. Next spring, I came back to camp, and I went from A ball to AAA because they had a guy named Ricky Wright who was hurt. So I went up to AAA for a couple of weeks. Then got sent back down to AA. I'd had a pretty good year. Then I got traded, right? I was in AAA, sitting in the bullpen. It was a hot day in the end of May in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Myself and another pitcher named Brett Wise. Our manager was Del Crandall, who was an old military guy.
Yeah.
From the Boston Braves, I believe, or the Milwaukee Braves. I'm sorry, the Milwaukee Braves. Yeah. And he was a drill sergeant. He was a real SOB. And I'll never forget, we were in the bullpen. I had my hat off and I was taking the sun. And after the game, Brent Strom, who still is a pitching coach for Arizona.
Great coach.
He's a pitching coach for Astros, I believe, years ago. Came up to me and Brett and said, Del wants to see you guys in the office. And I was like, oh, shit, What
do we do?
Caught us with our hats off. He's going to yell at us, going to fine us. We sat down across from him. He looked at us. He says, well, there's been a trade with Cincinnati. You guys are going to Cincinnati, and nice knowing you. And he walked out. And I was like shocked. So the first thing I thought about when going to Cincinnati was you weren't allowed to have facial hair, and I had a mustache.
Oh, yeah, you had the mustache.
And I was like, man, I got to shave my mustache. But then I called home. I talked to my dad, my brother, and they were like, because I thought I was going to get to the big leagues with the Dodgers because I went from A to AAA, AA, and then AAA. I was, pretty close. I was a starting pitcher at the time. And my brother right away looked up the Cincinnati Reds, what kind of left-handed relievers and starters they had. And he said, look, they got Bill Shear, a guy named Bob Olchinko. So I never heard of them before. So I went to Indianapolis, who we had a really bad team in Indianapolis that year. Our manager was the first manager for Toronto Blue Jays. Roy Hartsfield was our manager.
Roy Hartsfield, oh my God.
And we met the team in Denver. We started talking, blah, blah, blah. So that year, it was a so-so year. And I was a starter, but my claim to fame in AAA in Indianapolis that year is I had 6 RBIs in one game. So
really?
What?
I hit a 3-run homer and a 3-run double, and I got a no decision that game. So,
oh my God, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I hit a home run against you guys probably remember a guy, left-handed pitcher for the Expos named Joe Heskett.
Joe Heskett. Yeah.
So I hit a 3-run homer against him. Then I hit a 3-run double against a relief pitcher. I never forget, my dad and brother were there. My dad cooked me. My pregame meal was spaghetti with garlic and oil, which I always loved. My dad cooked that for me. And I wound up leaving the game winning 10-4, like in the 6th inning. And a left-handed reliever came in after me, and a guy named Bob Tufts. And I pitched for Kansas City, I believe, a little bit. And he just gave it up, and I got a no decision that game. So I was like, okay, whatever, life of a starting pitcher.
What more could I do?
Yeah, exactly. But then the following year, I went to spring training with the Reds, and I had a real good camp with them. But prior to that, when I was with the Dodgers, I went to instructional league before I got traded, and I learned the circle change from Sandy Koufax, Larry Sherry, and pitching coach. My first pitching coach with the Dodgers, who later became my pitching coach with the Mets, was Dave Wallace. And they showed me, how to throw the circle change. And I'll never forget the first time I threw the circle change. I threw it over the backstop. I said, "There's no way I could." And they just said, "Just keep throwing it, throwing."
That became your pitch.
Yeah, that became my pitch. So when I went to camp with the Reds in 84, I was throwing a changeup, and I seen these guys were missing it by 2 feet. I was pitching against Tony Perez, Cesar Cedeno, Ken Griffey Jr., Sr., Dave Concepcion, and I had a real good camp. And at the end of camp, I wound up getting cut, and I thought I was going to make the team. And I kind of got ticked off. And then later on, you realize, Chris, as you know, as an agent, what they do with the players is they send them down so they can get another full year of service time out after them.
Yep.
So I got sent down to Wichita, which I highly, if you're mad at somebody, you can send them to Wichita for a couple of days. And I knew I was in trouble when McDonald's closes at 8:00 there. So
ouch.
Yeah. But I went to Wichita. I started off okay. I was a bullpen guy. And the guy that took my spot in the rotation was Ron Robinson. He was a right-handed high draft pick for the Reds. And I went to the bullpen, and 2 weeks later, I got a phone call on April 24th that I was going to be called to the big leagues. So I took everything I had with me from Wichita, and I met the team in Atlanta. And I'll never forget our clubhouse guy, Bernie Stowe, saw me walking in with like 4 suitcases. And he says, "Oh, you plan on staying a while?" I said, "I don't want to go back to Wichita." The ironic thing is about that day, April 24th is my wife's birthday. So I got called up on the 24th. It's my wife's birthday, and I wind up having 424 saves, so 424.
That was your number.
That's my number. So it was pretty cool.
That's wild.
So John, Chris and I were talking about this before you got on, and you just mentioned this, walking into the clubhouse. What was it for you going into a major? Yes, obviously you're in the minors, you're in college, but what was it going into a major league clubhouse for the first time? Were you intimidated? Were you shy?
A little bit of both. A little intimidated because here I am in the clubhouse with Dave Concepcion and Cesar Cedeno. These guys I watched as kids. They were at probably another year or two towards the end of their careers. Ken Griffey Sr. I just missed Johnny Bench, who was just retired. So I was pretty intimidated and shy. I was quiet. But I have to tell you that the one guy that to this day I love him to death, and I learned a lot from him, was a relief pitcher named Tom Hume. He was like one of the top short relievers, and he took me under his wing. And I just sat next to him on the plane. They had a locker room, and he just taught me everything: how to be a professional, how to act on the field, off the field. He didn't drink much. He was a gadget guy. He had all these gadgets and stuff. But he was one of the guys that I really look up to, and to this day, I still look up to him. We still have contact through Instagram and so on and so forth. So, he's a very special person to me that I've learned how to act and how to present myself as a big leaguer. But I was intimidated. I was shy. And I did get in the game that day, and I'll never forget the first guy I think I faced was Claudio Washington. He got a base hit against me. Next guy I walked. Next guy was a pitcher. He tried to bunt. I struck him out. I gave up a hit to Glenn Hubbard, remember second baseman?
Yeah.
Gave up a hit to him, so it was like first and second, a run scored. I walked the next guy, and I'm like, oh, man, I'm going right back down to Wichita. And our pitching coach was Stan Williams. He came out to the mound, and I was looking up at the stands, and I couldn't even spit. I felt like I had cotton balls in my mouth. And he said, just relax, blah, blah, blah. Dave Concepcion came into me with his broken English, says, Johnny, have them hit it to me. Now I'm like, okay, great. I wish it was that easy. Now I'm facing Dale Murphy with bases loaded and 1 out.
Oh.
And I threw it. The second pitch I threw to him was a 2-seam fastball. He hit a one hot screamer right to Dave Concepcion. Stepped on second, threw to first, got him out. After that I ran right to the bathroom because I was so nervous. But it's all learning experience, and I learned a lot from the Cincinnati Reds. Freddie Norman was one of my pitching coaches, a little lefty, so he helped me develop my changeup also, and then got traded to the Mets. A couple years later.
So I wanted to get into that. I mean, not you glossed over it, but I mean, you were a save leader in the National League. You had some great years with the Reds, and it's the winter of '89, and there's a trade, and it's a big trade because you got traded for another one of the top closers, also a lefty, right. Randy Myers. But this wasn't just any trade because you were coming home. You were coming to New York. You grew up a Mets fan, right?
Right.
And you were a fan of your guy was Tug McGraw, right? When you were a kid, he was the lefty. I mean, he happened to be a lefty reliever at the time. You weren't a lefty reliever at the time, but he was someone you could relate to and you enjoyed watching. And here you are, you're coming to New York, and obviously, and I talked to you about this the other day randomly before we even talked about you coming on the show, but it was funny. You went from Eric Davis with the Reds, was your teammate, and had some really great years right before that. And then you come to the Mets, which was really Darryl's team, Straw's team.
Right.
And I remember an interview with you. I don't know why this stuck in my mind, but I was big fans of Darryl and Eric. When I was younger, I remember you saying like, no, I know Straw for a long time. He's a great guy. He reminds me of Eric. They're very similar personalities, and looking forward to kind of teaming up with him. Now Darryl only played one year with you, and then he ended up leaving as a free agent. But you came back to New York, and what was that like? Obviously, you had your brother, which you talked about a little before. Jimmy was a huge fan. He's such a big baseball fan and such a big Mets fan. And actually, while we're talking about Darryl and Jimmy, I wanted to go back to something because I was at the game. You had a game. You were pitching for the Reds. You came in to close out the game at Shea Stadium.
I know where you're going with this. Go ahead.
Okay. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, Johnny. I didn't know you at the time, and I loved Darryl. He was my guy, and I had a pretty girl with me at the game, and I was excited for the game. And you came in to close out the game, and you were pretty money. But this night, you gave up I think you might have walked the guy. Or you gave up a hit.
I walked Keith Hernandez.
You walked Keith Hernandez.
I walked Keith Hernandez, who I owned.
Yeah, and who you did well against. It's true. Yeah. And then Darryl deposited the ball over the right center field fence.
Yeah. So leading up to that, so I had 2 quick outs. I walked Keith Hernandez, who I was mad about because I could get Keith Hernandez out because I used to jam him a little bit, then 2-seamer. He'd hit a ground ball to short all the time. And I wound up walking him. Our pitching coach, Scott Breeden, came out to the mound to talk to me, and I was like, why the hell is he coming out? I walked the guy.
Yeah.
I don't know why he came out. To this day, I still don't know why he came out. Came out, said some words to me, talked. As soon as he put his first step on the dugout step, the first pitch I threw, Darryl hit a home run off of me. So it was a game winner. My brother, who was a Met fan, lived, and I had a 3-family house that I lived in. I lived in the middle when I was married at the time. My brother put a strawberry shortcake in front of my door.
He came home to a strawberry shortcake after getting a walk-off home run.
So the next day, I left my brother tickets in the mezzanine section. So he had no.
I didn't know that part. That's great.
What goes around comes around. But that, but obviously, Darryl got me. I had pretty good success against Darryl, but I left one out over the plate. And when you do that in the big leagues and good hitters, they're going to take advantage of it.
Yeah, take advantage. So John, you come home, right, to the Mets. What is that like? I mean, I can only imagine what that's like. Your favorite team, but does it change for you in terms of like, hey, like I'm coming, after the game, I'm going to my house. It's not a house that I rented. It's not a house that I'm going to be there only 6 months. This is my home.
Yeah. So let me lead lead up to that trade. So that winter, '89, the winter of '89, Reds general manager at the time, I think it was Murray Cook at the time. Bill Burgess, I don't remember which one, had called me and told me that they want to offer me a 3-year contract. And this was like a week before the general manager winter meetings. And I said, well, I haven't talked to my agent, blah, blah, blah. Let me get back to you. And they said, okay. And then in the papers, I had seen that there were trade talks about me maybe going to the Yankees. So I said, okay, I'm still coming home. I'm not a Yankee fan, but I'll play for the Yankees because I thought that George Steinbrenner was a great owner. A couple of days before the winter meetings, GM calls me and says, Lou Piniella, who they just named manager, wants to meet with you in the Short Hills Mall to have lunch. So I said, sure. So that was like end of November, early first day of December, and 2 days later, I get a phone call from the GM from the Reds. Said I've been traded to New York, and I said, okay, thank you very much, blah blah blah. I hung up the phone, and Marge Schott called me, who was the owner of the Reds, and she knew nobody's name, so she said, "Honey," to me. Hi, honey. I'm sorry you're getting traded. And I put my wife on the phone. My wife talked to her for like a half hour. And then 15 minutes later, I'm thinking it's the Yankees. And 15 minutes later, Joe McIlvaine called me. And then right away, I knew that I got traded to the Mets. And it was a pretty good party that night in my house, I can tell you that.
That's awesome.
But go back to your question now. Coming home, I think the best thing that happened to me was playing in Cincinnati for 5 years. 6 years that I was there, because it kind of helped me along to what to expect to come. I mean, I knew what to expect because I grew up and I see how fans are here in New York City. But getting my feet wet and getting them on the ground and establishing myself for 6 years in the big leagues before I came back, I knew, just try not to put no pressure on yourself. I wound up getting 2 phone lines in my house, one for family, one for friends, because everybody wants tickets. And just try to be myself, and just be the person that I was since high school, college. Be a gamer out there. I give 150%. If my brother was in the batter's box and I had to knock him down, I was going to knock him down. So that was my mentality. I came to work every day. Not like today where relief pitchers pitch 2 days in a row and they get 2 days off. I would pitch 5, 6, 7 days in a row. We had Turk Wendell on our team, the Mets. He went 9 days in a row. So, things are different now, obviously, but it was great coming home. It has its highs and lows, especially if you blew a save and, you would hear it, I always consider the relief pitcher like a field goal kicker, correct? You make 15 in a row, everybody loves you. It's the one that you miss, then that's the only one that they remember.
Yeah.
Basically, that was it. Coming home, it was, I was home for 15 years, so it was great. I didn't have to uproot my family. My kids, stood in school. They would come to spring training for 2 weeks when we were down there. My son would, he was like a baseball rat, like a gym rat. He was a baseball rat. I would take him to the back fields, and I remember throwing buckets of baseball for him to take batting practice, hit him ground balls until he couldn't run no more. I bet if I start off, I get 10 balls behind you. If you miss 10 balls, you can get no ice cream. We play games like that. And then got to the point where I was throwing batting practice, and I realized I'm throwing like almost 200 pitches to him. And I used to give one of the bullpen guys like $20 to come out there and pitch, because I might have thrown my arm out throwing so many pitches. But it was great. It was great coming home. I wouldn't change it for anything. I mean, I wish we would have won a little bit more in the early '90s, but that's what happens. You can't predict what's going to happen.
But Johnny, you and again, this ties into kind of when we first met and we started. I got to know you. You became an institution in New York City. You kind of were, but now you're here with the Mets, and you were kind of, you got named captain of the team, which is that doesn't happen to closers. Number one, but you were the leader of those teams, and the teams didn't maybe win the World Series, but there were some really great years there that, that you were the guy. I mean, and again, for a young guy like I was coming into the clubhouse working this is when I was still working for the team, and when I worked for the Mets, you were an intimidating figure because you kind of ran that locker room, with a couple other guys here and there, but Lou and I talked about it a little before. You said you learned from Tom Hume, you came up, a certain way. You're an old school guy. There are very many traditions in baseball, and I think you're very strong on those. I am too. And I think that's an interesting part of the game that maybe a lot of people outside don't know, but just you really took charge of that team. And I think if somebody wasn't acting the way they should be acting, or like you said earlier, when you learned how to act like a big leaguer, if you thought you were the first one to call them out, you would take them aside. You busted chops and stuff like that, and did it with me and everybody else. But I think that's what helped make that a great locker room.
Yeah. Well, if a guy wasn't performing or if a guy wasn't doing what he needed to do, the best time to go talk to those guys was during batting practice. I would walk into the outfield, and if he was standing there, and I say, "Hey, Chris, yesterday you hit that pop-up, you didn't run hard. I'm not telling you what to do, but this is what I see. You could tell me to go take a shit or whatever, but this is what I see, and this is what I think you should do. If you don't want to do it, that's up to you." So, but we very rarely did we have any problems in the locker room. I would tell you that the 15 years that I played with the Mets, got along with everyone. There was no issues. I mean, there was obviously some teams that in the early 90s with the firecracker stuff and the bleach stuff that the guys got in trouble. But most of the time, all the teammates, all the guys were really, really good guys.
Well, I think a lot of that is as somebody who was in but not, on the team. But I mean, look, I have things. I have your 400 save that you had made for the whole team, and you made one for me, which again, you always included me as part of the team, which I always appreciate. But my point is, well, I was a big part of the team.
He was Jay Horowitz's right-hand man at the time.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, I think a lot of that is credit to you, because like you said, you would nip things in the bud that before they got out of control, or
but Chris, we also had a lot of veterans on the team. When you had guys like Eddie Murray there, you had Bobby Bonilla, Ricky Henderson. These are veteran guys who played a long time, so they knew how to. Eddie Murray was one of the guys. He wouldn't talk to the press. Right? It made your job and Jay's job so hard.
Yep.
Because Eddie wouldn't talk to the media. I mean, here he is, a Hall of Famer. We didn't have too many young guys. I think Greg Jeffries was in his second year or something when I got there. But really, we had most of the time we had like a veteran team. There really weren't any young, up and coming guys from the minor league, except for like the later on the Generation K guys, Isringhauser, Pulsifer, and Paul Wilson. So, but otherwise, we didn't have that type of guy like a David Wright coming up. David Wright came up, I think, my last year with the Mets. It was his first year with the Mets in 2004, I believe. So he came up like towards the end. But most of the teams that we had when I was there were veteran guys. A guy like Rick Cerrone, who played for the Yankees.
Yep.
Cerrone.
Well, just a lot of names like, obviously you and Al, and then obviously Mike came over, Piazza and guys like that. But we also, remember like Oral Hershiser, remember he came over.
99.
Hershiser was a great addition.
Yeah.
Guys like that. You're right. And then there was a lot of maybe not as huge a name as Oral Hershiser, but like a Dennis Cook or,
Well, the Dennis Cooks, the Rick Whites, the Turk Windells, I'm trying to think of the other guys in the bullpen. Mike Stanton, who came over. Pat Mahomes. Those guys were the unsung heroes. Those guys.
100%.
Middle relief guys came in to get the ball to me.
Yep.
And those guys at the time, middle relievers didn't get the recognition that they do now, and they didn't get paid the way they do now.
Yep.
So the Dennis Cooks and like I said, the Turk Windells, they did and Pat Mahomes Sr.
Yep.
They did great jobs coming in middle relief, holding it down to get the ball to me.
So, John, how often do you call Pat Mahomes now?
I don't call Pat Mahomes at all. I saw him was it? We had Old Timers Day about 2 years ago.
A couple years ago, yep.
Yeah. So I haven't called. He's in a little trouble now, I believe.
He's in a little trouble now. So, John, and I think I know the answer to this, but could a pitcher like yourself in today's game, would he be drafted or even looked at?
I'd say it's 50-50 because of now that there's so much in the velocity, spin rate, all of that stuff.
What's your feeling?
If you look back, look at Mike Maddox, Greg Maddox, Tom Glavine. Those guys weren't hard throwers, but they knew how to pitch. They changed speeds.
Yeah,
and they did a great job. Now, if you look at it, they want everybody throwing 95 to 98 miles an hour, elevate your fastball, 4-seam fastballs, no 2-seamers. Nobody wants to throw 2-seamers no more. And I always tell the young guys, I know 2-seam is the best pitch in baseball because it's going to get a sinker, they're going to hit ground balls, and save your pitch count. So yeah, everybody, they want strikeouts now. That's what the game has gone to. And I don't know if that has contributed to the arm injuries that happen to so many pitchers now. Everybody keeps saying it could be the pitch clock. Well, I don't believe it's the pitch clock.
Yeah,
I just think it's more stressful. These guys are throwing so much harder. I think they don't take time off in the off season, and it's just wear and tear.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
Johnny, I wanted to go back because you've mentioned him a couple of times. I wanted to talk about your dad, and I think some people may know the story, some people might not. Your dad was a sanitation worker in New York City. He was very obviously a strong presence in your life. You always wore the orange T-shirt, his orange T-shirt, the the New York Sanitation Department. I wanted to talk about your dad a little bit.
Well, my dad was he was a really quiet guy. He would come to the game and when I was in high school and in college and just sit kind of by himself and not sit with the other parents, And he used to say, people would say, "Why don't you, talk about your son?" And he said, "My son was talking between the lines." If I had bad games in the minor league, I would call home, and he was the sound the reason. You call home, and he'd calm you down. I remember my first year at St. John's, I didn't want to go to school. I was thinking about quitting, and he says, "What are you going to do with your life? You got an opportunity here to make something. Get a great education, even if you don't make it to the pros." And he was the voice of reason. And my brother helped out quite a bit too along the way too. They were my number one fans. I remember my first season with the Mets against the Astros. I was pitching in a tie game. I remember I had 2 outs, 2 strikes, bases loaded, and Doug Harvey, who was the umpire, called a balk on me. And I was arguing with the balk, and as I'm arguing with him, I'm looking in the stands, and my brother's against the screen, just screaming and yelling at Doug Harvey. So that's the type of fan he was. But we came back the next inning and we wound up winning. But my dad was when I played, he was always drive me to the games, watch the games. When I was in college, he drove to Omaha when we were in the World Series. When I was in the minor leagues, he didn't like to fly, so him and my brother drove to San Antonio, Texas. So
it's a ride.
Yeah, but he was quiet, but very influential in my career. That's for sure.
Now, and I wanted to, tie it in because you had told me this a long time. Obviously, you got to know my dad pretty well, and you guys had a special connection just because you guys were both from Brooklyn. My dad, that was like part of the, that was like a gang, for my dad, that was like a gang. Like if you were from Brooklyn, you're from Brooklyn, and that's his people or whatever. And obviously you went to rival schools, obviously many years apart, but he went to Erasmus Hall, and my dad talked about Erasmus Hall like it was like, the Mecca. And
but he's right, because back in the day, Erasmus Hall was like the school. It was, Lafayette High School where I went. Sandy Koufax went there. Fred Wilpon went there. Sandy Koufax, they named a pitching award after Sandy Koufax. He never pitched at Lafayette. He played first base. Fred Wilpon was the star pitcher there.
Yep.
So, but Erasmus Hall back in the day, Chris, when your
No,
dad probably was there, was like the top school in the city.
it was one of the top schools in the country, I think, back in the day, and it was a great, great place. And my dad he also often reminded me that Lafayette was the place he hit his one home run.
Was that before they moved the fences back, or you and my dad, I always, I never, unfortunately, didn't have the pleasure of meeting your dad, but I felt like I knew him because you talked about him so much, and we talked about him a lot through the years. But I introduced you to my dad a long, long time ago, back in the 90s, and you guys had really a special connection. And I remember which I thought this was such an honor, because I know how you revered your dad. You told me, how much you love my dad, and how he reminded him. Yeah.
He reminded you of your dad.
Yeah, your dad was like quiet but very influential. I always remember your dad always got along really well with my brother Jimmy.
100%.
They would sit and just talk baseball, talk Mets.
100%.
You would think they were like the general manager and the owner of the team, the way they talk.
Exactly.
You're not getting traded, John. You're not getting traded.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, not to whatever, but I mean, I remember there was a game in the late 90s, and I think it was in September, and you blew the save at the end of the game. And when you came in, I remember you were obviously upset, and I talked to you after the game, and you were like, you were disappointed that what happened or whatever. And I remember you telling me, just like you had mentioned about Jimmy, when you were coming in, how you saw my dad sitting there, towards the front by the dugout, and you saw him so excited, and you felt like almost like you let him down, which I was just like, that meant, I mean, it just, obviously,
it's funny, my brother, your dad, the big fans and stuff, you let them down. But the thing that bothered me the most about my job was, if you were a starting pitcher and you went 6-7 innings and you really busted your tail and you left the game winning 3-1, 2-1, and here I am coming in the last inning just to get 3 goddamn outs, and I couldn't do it, and to give up game-winning home run or blew a save, you have nothing to show for it. Well, you really busted your tail for 6 innings, 7 innings. I should say 7, 8 innings back then. Now it's 5 innings, but it's that really bothered me the most when I blew a save.
Yeah. So, listen, Johnny, we could probably talk about stuff all day. I had one other thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I just want to make the point, from my perspective. Look, you mentioned it earlier. You had 424 saves. Okay, you're 5th on the all-time save list. I think the one thing I want to say about you is that just a general statement in the Hall of Fame. Okay, talking about the National Baseball Hall of Fame, you're a New York Met Hall of Famer, which is a tremendous honor, well deserved by you. But the relief pitchers are unrepresented, aren't represented properly, in my opinion, in the Hall of Fame. I think you see a lot of people going in that you're like, oh, I don't know. But where are the relief pitchers? I was really happy to see Lee Smith get in a few years ago, because he was a dominant reliever for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And you were too, in your own way. You were a different type of pitcher than Lee Smith, obviously. But I just wanted to, I mean, I'm curious your feeling of it. But I mean, when you're talking about, Mariano, obviously, Trevor Hoffman, obviously, they're both contemporaries of yours. Lee Smith, another contemporary of yours. K-Rod, also you pitched at the same time as him, and then it's you. And I feel like, just like you could say this about other sports, punters in the, Ray Guy finally got into as a punter. I think he's the only punter in the NFL Hall of Fame. You can't have a game without a punter.
Right.
But even more so, a closer is now such an important thing, and such an important role in the game. I'm just curious, where you're at in that, where your headspace is.
Well, I think Tony La Russa really started that with Dennis Eckersley, the 1 inning pitches when he was in Oakland, and everybody just kind of followed suit with that. As far as the Hall of Fame goes, listen, I can't control how people vote back in the day. Now you have the Veterans Committee, the New Era Committee, the Contemporary Committees. So that's what I'm laying my hat on. Hopefully one of those committees, when I'm eligible, that I get voted in. I mean, I know Billy Wagner got pretty close this year. Well, I think he had 72%. I think he needs 75%. So if Billy gets in, there's a good chance that I can get in. I do have the most saves in the history of baseball for left-handed relievers. So, and I think the relievers are starting to get recognized a lot more now because of the fact that the game has changed and has become a shorter game where the starters are only going shorter and the relievers it's play an important role in baseball.
And I agree 100%. And I think it's something that you deserve.
And I did no steroids.
well,
and I played in the juice ball era and the
exactly.
steroid era.
Oh,
yeah.
that's big.
No, you're right. And the one other point I would just want to make is, I have to wonder if you were throwing 100 miles an hour every pitch, would you be viewed differently as far as that goes? Because you were crafty and you were smart and you had a different pitching style, but not that you couldn't throw hard, but I'm just saying
Chris, Trevor Hoffman wasn't a hard throw either. He was a really two-pitch pitcher like I was, fastball changeup. And Trevor had a tremendous changeup. So
yep.
Obviously he has 600 saves. That helped quite a bit. And Mariano was the best of all time. I don't care what era you talk about. You could talk about Raleigh Fingers. You could talk about Bruce Sutter. All those Goose Gosses. Mariano was hands down the best relief pitcher of all time.
No question. But I think it's something that people have to start opening their mind to, because, and it's funny, I talk to my kids all the time. They always arguing with me over who should be Hall of Famers. And they say, do you think he's Hall of Famer? And I'll be like, well, he's played like 3 great years. Yeah. But he's got, to me, length and consistency of the career. That's the key. And if you look at your
playing on winning teams help too. Getting in the playoffs and World Series, that helps a lot too.
Yeah, 100%. But my point to you is that if you go down to Baseball Reference or whatever you look at to find stats, look up John Franco and look at what he's done, and look at what you've done and the length and consistency. Your numbers year in, year out are solid, if not spectacular. And it's something that really people should start thinking about, because it's this silly that someone who had the 5th most in the history of the game is not at the forefront here.
Well, if you look at the Hall of Fame, right, although it's all about numbers, right? 3,000 hits, 500 home runs, 300 wins,
no question.
300 saves at the time was the magic number. So, like I said before, there's some committees now where the writers do not have any vote in. It's the Hall of Famers. There are a couple of baseball executives. So those are the guys who vote on these committees, and hopefully they'll recognize what I've done, and I'll get voted in down the road somewhere.
Well, I hope so. We didn't get a chance to talk about Franco's Army, our championship fantasy football teams, but that's maybe part 2. Maybe part 2.
You were a pretty good general manager for Franco's Army, that's for sure.
Well, thank you. You're a good owner.
Lou, he used to call me up on Fridays and say, "Okay, which guy do you think we should play? Should we trade for this guy? Should we trade for that guy?" It was a pretty good fantasy football league that we had.
Well, it's funny. I remember I was in Miami at my cousin's house, and I'm watching Curt Schilling pitch like a 2-hit shutout in the playoffs, and everybody's like, making a big deal about him, and literally I want to make a trade with him. He was in our league, and the game ended. I couldn't wait for the game to end, and I called him, and he answered right away, and we started talking about the trade, making a trade, and my cousin's like, who are you talking to? I'm like, the guy we just watched pitch the 2-hit shutout in the playoffs. He's answering your call right now. I go, yeah, because he's a big fantasy guy.
That was a good league. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun what we had. And then,
for sure.
Then we had the one with the Mets too. Remember?
And we did the Yep. Yeah. Well, we had a couple. We had 2 good teams. So
so it was run pretty good. You and Vinny Greco ran it. It was a lot of fun.
Yep. Awesome stuff. Johnny, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks
really
for having
appreciate
me.
having it. All right. We'll see you soon. Thanks, Johnny.
You got it. Take care, guys.
Take care.
Take care, John.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, that was great, Lou. Johnny is the best.
He's the best. He's awesome.
So
We should have a part 2, by the way, with him, because there's so many stories.
There's so many things we could talk about with him. But the one thing I just wanted to talk about, and this is very important, and that's something that is called Hall of Fame vodka. Okay, you got yours. Yeah. I got mine. Look at this bottle. Look how amazing it is. This is actually real vodka. Okay, now I'm not a drinker. You're not a drinker. Our wives, well, they're drinkers.
They're drinkers.
They loved it. This stuff is this is something so cool. This is an award-winning package. It's made in the U.S. Okay. It's made in Lexington, Kentucky, which is bourbon country. It's a family-owned business. It's a small independent company, but this stuff is awesome. Okay. And I just wanted to let our viewers and listeners know about it. If you have a baseball fan who is likes their vodka, you're going to get this for them. It's a no-brainer. It is fantastic. And just the packaging itself, to put it on a liquor shelf or a cabinet or something. I mean, how cool is this packaging? It's called Hall of Fame Vodka. It's available on hallofamespirits.com. We'll put it up on our site and everything. But I'm telling you, this is something you're going to want to get. And I'm proud that they've chosen us to sponsor us here for this episode.
Agreed. This is pretty awesome, man. I mean, listen, even if you're not a drinker, you have friends that drink who are big vodka guys. Yep. You're baseball fans. This is the way to go.
We're ordering like a case of this, and we're going to use this as gifts, as parties and birthday gifts and things like that. And my wife told me it went down real smooth, and it's really good. And I know our producers, Bang and Bob, they're enjoying theirs as well. So big thank you to Bubba over at Hall of Fame, and everybody, make sure you get this. All right, Lou. Thanks for everything. Great show. We'll see you guys again next week.
Take care, guys.
Take care.